Texting provides a simple and great way to keep in contact with others. Some people text their friends and loved ones every single day. Others use the feature only when necessary to send information. These cases involve the last text messages ever sent by people that have since gone missing. Sometimes this evidence is an important tool in a case's investigation, but other times it's a sad reminder of how suddenly things can become tragic. Number 5. In late 2018, just a few days before Christmas, 40-year-old Michael Stewart went missing. Stewart, a father of 2, sent his mother an eerie and concerning text message before he was officially declared missing. The message read, "Please help, Mom," and was sent at around 6:30 p.m. on December 20th. His mother was obviously alarmed by the message and began trying to contact her son. After several phone calls and multiple text messages went unanswered though, Michael never returned home that night or in the days that followed. His family realized that something was seriously wrong and he was reported missing. An initial search led investigators in circles. Witnesses reported seeing him leave O'Neill's Irish pub in Staten Island around the time of his message. However, no nearby cameras fully captured his actions before leaving the bar. Finally, detectives were able to track down nearby surveillance footage that did spot Michael. About 30 minutes later, after his concerning text, he was filmed standing outside of a barbershop with a group of people. It appeared as though they were arguing, but without audio recordings, it's impossible to confirm the exact nature of the conversation. He walked away from this interaction, and officers initially assumed that this was the last piece of evidence in a short trail. However, Michael was reported missing and featured in the news, and anonymous witnesses came forward to share that they'd seen him at another local barbershop 30 minutes later. Michael allegedly had a conversation with one of the witnesses, in which he explained that he'd experienced a confrontation earlier that day with a male acquaintance of his ex-girlfriend. According to his report, he also argued with his ex-girlfriend concerning the visitation rights of his daughter. His family shared with reporters that Michael would never willingly miss a Christmas with his family, making the possibility of vanishing voluntarily less likely. In January of 2019, officers found a heap of Michael's clothing deserted near open water. The clothing held his DNA as well as a second person's. A witness came forward and stated that they had significant information concerning the case. The witness pointed a finger at Angelo Nassimi, a longtime friend of Michael and a person of interest in the case. Despite the charges, Angelo is still considered innocent until proven guilty. The chilling last text message from Michael is still a confusing portion of his story. Investigators assume that Michael may have been aware of what was to come and unfortunately didn't reach out for help soon enough. His mother will likely be haunted by the final text for years to come until the court case is finally settled. Number 4. This particular case has very little information to provide as it's still very new and still ongoing. Sometime in August of 2019, 40-year-old Mark Davies was reported missing. Mark was a resident of Valley City, North Dakota. The night he went missing, he made a short trip to Catherine, North Dakota, about 20 minutes away. However, the purpose of his travel is unknown. Friends and family were initially alarmed long before the man went missing because he usually takes his dog, Hank, everywhere with him. They stated that it was so uncommon for the dog to be left at home, and that's what sparked worry amongst Mark's friends. Again, his reason for leaving the dog behind is unknown, but on August 23rd, Mark was last seen by witnesses in the Catherine area. Around midnight of that same evening, Mark's neighbor was engaging in a text conversation with him. The last message that Mark sent said that he was leaving Catherine's bar, a popular bar in the area, and was heading home. That night, Mark never returned home, and his friends and family were immediately unsettled. They began texting and calling him the morning after his disappearance, hoping that he was safe, but Mark didn't respond, and it was made clear that his phone had died or was lost. Still, his loved ones waited patiently before contacting police, assuming he may have been with a friend or simply didn't have a phone charger, or had misplaced his cell while out of town. After several days with no sign of him, the authorities were contacted. A search quickly ensued, starting in the Catherine area and stretching to Valley City. Investigators believed that mobile data or credit card use history were the best leads to follow in this case, but sadly, Mark is still missing, and although the case continues, little to no evidence has been found of him or his last moves before vanishing. The strange part about Mark's case is that it clearly implies that he intended to come home, meaning that something likely happened to him on his route. Number 3. This entry perfectly represents the panic that mysterious final text can provoke. However, it also happens to be one of very few missing persons cases where the victim was found safely. Still, these haunting last messages painted a dark picture for Erin Vandewaal and her loved ones. Erin began dating a man named Joe Mayer, and after a few months together, they decided to move from Wisconsin to Denver. Erin arrived in her new hometown and lived silently with her lover for about a month. Once that month was up, though, Erin began sending alarming text messages to her loved ones back in Wisconsin. On several occasions, Erin texted her close friend Stacy Morris expressing that she was afraid of Joe and wanted desperately to get out of the relationship. During a text conversation just a day before Erin went missing, she told Stacy, "He's gonna kill me if I don't get away from him today." This is allegedly the last form of contact anyone had with Erin before she vanished. She was reported missing on July 23, 2018 by her loved ones in Wisconsin, after she'd not returned their calls or texts for several days. During the early investigation, Erin's ID and social security card were found abandoned on a public transit bus near Denver. In addition to her upsetting messages, this evidence was of a grim finding for her family and friends, who naturally assumed the worst. Joe Mayer was arrested shortly after Erin went missing for unrelated warrants. He was taken back to Wisconsin and interrogated as a main suspect in the case. However, officers were unable to draw a confession out of him, and very little evidence was available. Joe was eventually let off the hook as investigators assumed that he was not involved. Erin was considered missing for at least 3 months, and detectives followed a trail of available evidence and worked hard to find more information. Erin's family stated later that they spent their time assuming the worst had happened, especially because of her last messages. They believed if Erin was safe and had vanished on purpose to avoid Joe, that she would at least find a way to contact them. When this didn't occur, her family faced a terrifying possibility that Erin would never return. Luckily though, that was not the case. In October of 2018, investigators actually stumbled upon Erin, who was living in the streets, not in the best of conditions. Despite being homeless and a bit rustled, Erin was in good health and a happy mood. Officers encouraged her to call her family in Wisconsin, and the case was finally closed. Information regarding Erin's choices and a lack of contact was not released in detail. While we shouldn't victim blame, it's important to note that Erin should have found a way to report herself safe so that her family could rest and her investigation could close, leaving room for other cases in need of attention and more manpower. Number 2. Keith Bailey is a 48-year-old man who was living with his wife in Phoenix, Arizona when he went missing. Nikki Bailey, his wife, told investigators that on the morning of Tuesday, August 6, 2019, she and her husband went for a 3-mile walk. After their exercise, they returned home and Keith got ready for work. Before leaving, according to Nikki, Keith kissed her goodbye and things between them seemed great. Keith drove off to work and Nikki has not seen him since. The pair kept in contact via text throughout the first part of the day, but Nikki became concerned when Keith abruptly stopped responding to her. Additionally, he didn't answer any of her phone calls, and to make matters worse, the final text that Keith sent said, "I'm so sorry for all the pain and stress I've caused you," an eerie message that felt almost like a goodbye. Throughout the remainder of the day, Nikki did her own investigating. She tracked her husband's phone location, which put Keith on Highway 87, heading northeast of Payson, Arizona. However, the pings randomly stopped and she was unable to continue tracking him. She also found that before his final text to her, Keith had sent a text to his ex-wife, informing her that he'd moved a large sum of money into his oldest son's bank account. Nikki later received an alert from their bank informing her that their credit card had been used for gas in Payson, Arizona. She received no further alerts and grew more and more worried about her husband's well-being. Finally, she contacted authorities who followed similar steps to Nikki's casual investigation, and unfortunately, like Nikki, they hit a dead end as well. Law enforcement and the general public were notified to be on the lookout, and from one point of view, you may suspect that Keith simply wanted a way to clear his head. However, his final text message implied something much darker, and that Keith may be taking his own life. In a strange way though, those eerie last messages were key pieces of evidence in the search as they proved that Keith was in some sort of danger, even if it was self-inflicted. These conditions usually speed up the investigation process, but unfortunately, Keith has still not been located and his wife worries that something bad may have happened to him. Number 1. On October 2nd, 2018, 46-year-old Cheryl Cocker was reported missing by her sister and daughter. Investigators were able to create a short timeline of Cheryl's actions on the day that she vanished. She left her home around 7:15 a.m. to take her daughter to school. She returned home at around 7:40 and spent a few minutes relaxing while sharing and posting content to Facebook. After this, little is known about what happened to her. Video surveillance footage shows her car pulling into a nearby Kroger parking lot at 10:48 a.m. Unfortunately, the footage ends before anyone can exit the vehicle, making it impossible to confirm Cheryl as the driver. Later that same day, Cheryl's sister noticed that she'd not received a response from Cheryl for several hours, something that was very unlike her. Several hours passed, but in the evening, her sister was preparing to go to Cheryl's home when Cheryl's daughter called to explain that her mother didn't show up to pick her up from school. Authorities were then called and an investigation opened. Detectives found that Cheryl had been experiencing marital problems and wanted to file for divorce despite her husband's protests. Additionally, a final text that Cheryl sent to her coworker was discovered. The text read, "I'll be in tomorrow if I'm not dead." While it may be a random dark joke at the time, it triggered investigators to look for signs of foul play. In the most recent update concerning the case, officers made a public statement claiming that they had a suspect in custody and were working hard to serve justice and locate Cheryl. They didn't share the suspect's identity, but many believe it could be Cheryl's husband. The last text she sent serves as an unsettling truth that Cheryl was in danger and knew it. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you like this video, be sure to click that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep updated with our videos. And if you enjoyed this narration, maybe consider checking out my personal channel at youtube.com/ty_knots.